tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, empowerment-filling, humor-loving life hacks and motivation tips for all of the medically adultish people in your life. I'm Dominique Vale, the founder of InvisiYouth, and today we're on episode 23 of season 2. And my special guest that we have on the podcast today has actually been part of a campaign that we've talked about probably on 3 or 4 different episodes in season 1, starting episode 4 of this entire video podcast series. We've been talking about this campaign. So I'm very excited that we get to have one of the lovely ladies who was part of it as our special guest today. So I am talking to Abby Sams, who a lot of you will know her as one of the models for Aerie's #AerieReal campaign that was going on last year. We'll be some of her photos throughout. You can definitely check our social media as well. You'll get to see some of the fabulous photos of Abby completely crushing it as a badass with her wheelchair and walking crutches, rocking Aerie's clothes. She's fantastic, so I'm really excited that we get to have some representation on the show today from the AerieReal campaign. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a bio on Abby. Abby's a 21-year-old Liberty University student who is studying green sustainability management and documenting her journey towards zero waste in her social media. And on the other side, Abby is also raising amazing awareness on modeling with Aerie and growing her social media following on Instagram, really documenting anything from her wheelchair racing journey to her accessibility and diversity in the fashion industry, accessibility of using mobility aids. So you really get to see such a wide span of how amazing Abby is, especially through her social media, of the amazing awareness that she's raising for the chronic illness and disability community. And for us, what makes Abby such a breath of fresh air for advocacy for young adults is that she really has been so vocal and open about her diagnosis journey through her teen years now, and really talking about what it's like to live with different types of chronic illnesses. She has some of them we can name are reflex sympathetic dystrophy, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Yeah, that was a bunch of medical jargon I just threw out. And for fun fact for all of you listeners and viewers, most of those are my illnesses as well. So Abby and I bonded right over a diagnosis code right there. With our help today, Abby's going to really be talking about how she uses knowledge and humor to educate a lot of people around her and the general population about living with chronic illness and what it's like to build accessibility, what adaptive sports mean to her. And we're really going to be documenting this whole entire process that she's become such a trailblazer for us, and we're so excited that Abby's going to be talking about some of these awesome topics and a lot of the adventures she's had over the last year. So everybody, welcome Abby to the show. Hey Abby, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good. Like I said, I have been getting text messages of photos of your campaigns that you've been in for Aerie in malls and in commercials and magazines, and you were always one of the photos of the models for Aerie that so many of our volunteers and supporters were super excited about, because you represent such a wide range of the chronic illness and disability community, and your photos were pretty awesome. So I know we're super excited having you on the show, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers are going to be really happy getting a full hour of Abby talk, so I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited to talk about it.
Good. So, of course, I gave a little intro to all of you about Abby, but we're going to get to know her a little bit better and do one of my favorite segments to start off, 5-second challenge.
5-second challenge. 5-second challenge.
With 5-second challenge, this is where we get to know our guests in sort of a fun, rapid-fire way. I'm going to throw out all these fun, quirky questions at Abby, and we're going to see in 5 seconds what her answer is. So we're going to jump right in on these. So, okay, we're going to get ready with Abby. Okay. So what, if you had to pick your best memory so far of 2019, where or who would be a part of it?
Easily the day I got engaged, like 2 months ago or whatever. Yeah.
I love that. Wait,
I think that's a winner.
Shout out to your fiance. What's your fiance's name?
Carter,
shout out on the show. If you were going into an Aerie store, what would be 3 things you would definitely have to pick up while you're there?
underwear, leggings, and scrunchies.
Oh, scrunchies.
Always get them.
I love a good scrunchie. If you had to name your future racing wheelchair, what would you want to name it?
Atlas.
Atlas. Oh, I like that. That's cool. We said this before that you on your social media definitely rep a lot of activism t-shirts. So if you had to pick one of your favorites that you wear all the time, which is a big sort of awareness t-shirt that you wear quite a bit.
I think the Unbound t-shirt by Ruby Allegra, they designed that one, and that is easily the most worn t-shirt in my wardrobe.
I love that. And people can check out on your social media too. You have like epic t-shirts, I said. We're just obsessed with them.
So many.
So what has been your favorite university course so far?
Probably the first sustainable business class I took. We had to make a project that was the entire semester long, make a business that was green and sustainable, and I made a home healthcare company that's completely sustainable, and it was really fun.
Oh my god, that is amazing. Clearly healthcare, we love this.
Yeah, right.
So if you had to pick either your favorite tattoo or a new one you would like, which one would it be?
I only have 3 tattoos. I think my favorite is the one that I have on my thigh. It's almost the entire side of my right thigh. And it's the childhood cancer awareness ribbon with some roses and then a quote. And I think it's my favorite just because it costs so much and like I have to love it. But if I got another one, I think I'd get maybe like an olive branch on my forearm.
Oh,
but
nice.
I don't think about it much.
No, it's really amazing because a lot of your modeling photos you've done, you can see, especially the one that you said on your thigh, you can see it's a really beautiful tattoo. So if it's gonna take up that much room, it's a beautifully done tattoo as well.
Yeah.
At least it's pretty. So if you had to pick sort of another clothing brand that if you were going to go into, and I definitely want to model for them, which one would you pick?
I'd love to do an athletic wear. I feel like there's not representation in athletic wear at all. So like maybe a company like Outdoor Voices or even like Under Armour or Nike. I think that'd be really interesting to get some like different abilities in there. Yeah,
no, for sure. I'm getting super excited. We're gonna be putting this into the universe to get you an athletic leisure line to model for. We're putting it in the universe. It's happening. And final question, what would be one thing that you would like to add to your bio or your resume before 2020?
I'm not sure. Maybe more races, more 5Ks, half marathon, marathon. Ooh. I don't set too many goals for myself, but those are definitely up there.
I just have massive props. If you do a marathon, I will cheer you on from the sidelines because I don't have the mental stamina for that many miles, I think.
My sister comes to most of my 5Ks with me, and she just sits there at the finish line and is like, I'll be here when you get back, but no way I'm doing that with you.
It's like, good luck.
Yeah, bye.
I love that. So we're going to make a quick transition out of that. We're going to wheel our ways out of that one, and we're going to go into our next segment with Abby getting to know a lot more about her activism she does, and this is one of my favorite segments, Break That Glass Ceiling.
Break that glass ceiling. Break that glass ceiling.
All right, with Break That Glass Ceiling, this is where we always talk about breaking stigmas and misconceptions and really cracking through that glass ceiling that seems to be within the chronic illness and disability community, making there being more representation, more diversity, and especially having more of an inclusive accessibility for so many young people that have different types of chronic illness and disability. So with Abby, we're going to talk about not only what some of the barriers are that she's noticed, but different ways that she has been able to sort of crack the accessibility mold for being able to be more accessible and inclusive, and things that we would love to be able to have all of you guys put in your toolkit to help you find more ways of bringing diversity into a lot of the areas of your life that you want. So I know I said at the top of the show, but a big thing that my team and I said when we were planning Abby's episode is that we were trying to figure out how we would describe your activism, and we said, well, it's sort of kindly outspoken with a bunch of education. So we loved that you use so much humor but knowledge of just what it is literally in a logical sense of what accessibility is for you, and then really bringing in that sort of kind, humorous part of showing people where accessibility and where diversity needs to come to sort of be a step up and break that mold. So I know a big question is, so in your life so far, whether it's been through you doing work with Aerie or other campaigns that have come after that in work engagements or just in your daily life, what have been some of the barriers that you've noticed more often when it came to accessibility or inclusion in different work you've done?
Well, in like everyday life, accessibility is just such a toss-up. My sister and I play this game when we go to stores we've called it Barely Accessible, where it'll be aisles that, I have to like pull on the very tips of my wheels to actually get through the aisle, or a ramp, but it's nearly like a 90-degree angle. It's just so incredibly steep, things like that. A lot of everyday stuff is hard because you have historical buildings and they can get around the ADA because of that. But then when it comes to work, I've had a lot more opportunities be given and then immediately taken away as soon as I ask for accommodations, which is really frustrating. I've had a lot of like big name companies you would recognize the names of come and reach out to me, say that they really want me to model for them, and then as soon as I say, okay, well, I need to have accommodations at the airport and in the hotel, and can you make sure that the studio is wheelchair accessible? And they're like, actually, never mind, we're gonna go with someone else. And they just back out because they don't want to or actually can't provide the accommodations for me. And that's happened, outside of modeling work, even just trying to apply for a job at like a cafe, that they just really don't want to accommodate. And even though it's technically illegal to discriminate based on disability and race and gender identity and that kind of stuff, it's so easy for companies to find ways around that by, putting in their applications that you have to be able to stand for long periods of time. You have to be able to lift 50 to 100 pounds. And I can guarantee you, I would never be lifting 50 to 100 pounds like that. Nobody's ever doing that much. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference between standing and sitting? I don't understand what's wrong here. So it's a lot of, calling them back and be like, hey, can you not do that?
Yeah.
And speaking out, not just being like, well, that's a bummer, move on. There's a lot of, calling and letting them know how easy it would be to make themselves accessible and how many more people they'd get, and customers and employees,
Yeah, and I think a big thing you pointed out too, well, firstly, I think you and your sister need to have a t-shirt that says Barely Accessible on it, because that's just a slogan waiting to happen.
Right?
But I love that you said too, when you do sort of make that call back, that it isn't you sort of moving on to the next opportunity and seeing if they would be accessible, but it's really you taking that initiative, that even if you're not going to work with them on that opportunity, whether it is a modeling job or if it is another employment opportunity, you really take it as a sort of a teaching moment in a way of being able to say, well, this is how you could have made things accessible with one phone call or one move of just checking a door frame to see how wide it might be, and you just completely shut it down without even discussing it with the person you had an interest to work with. And I think when you said that, that was really what struck a chord, was that even if you won't make that, if you won't do that working opportunity, it's a big thing that we always say too, is a lot of times you want to take that teaching moment of saying thank you, but no thank you. And for the next time you try to reach out to someone with an illness or disability, this is what you could have done for them to make it work. And I think that's something great that you're able to do, even on your social media, talking about accessibility in work venues, or if you're traveling, and how many stores you can and can't get into, just even I'm going to say walking, but rolling around as well, maneuvering around, if you will, because you never know. So I think that's was a strong point that you made too, is just a lot of these additions are quite easy for an employer to do.
Yeah, and I've even started doing it, now that I travel so much, and so I'm staying in a lot of hotels and going to cities I've never been to. And the last hotel I stayed at when I was in Brooklyn, the check-in counter was a solid 1.5 feet above where my head was.
Oh no.
And so I was like, excuse me, hello, can anyone help me down here? I mean, it was just very awkward, and they needed me to sign something, and he had to pull a table from their lobby for me to actually be able to sign it. And I just went, do you understand what just happened here and why that shouldn't ever happen again? Like, maybe just lower it about a foot and you guys will be good. But that's not cool. So I'm going to go to my room and maybe you guys can fix that later.
Absolutely. And I think even what you just pointed out too, a big thing that I will say if I'm doing speaking engagements or if I have some of our global brand leaders work that we'll sort of give them tips on is really a lot of it is we become very thankful if a venue or an employer does make changes to be accessible for us or be more chronic illness friendly. And we'll always say, oh, well, you become so thankful, but you should, instead of thinking it's the employer granting you this amazing gift of adapting to you, you should think that accessibility is an inalienable right for anyone.
Yeah, that should be the bottom line, not like a high standard.
And if you definitely take that, if you switch that mindset of going, they're not gifting me anything. This is not an amazing, they're not actually, if they rolled out an actual red carpet for you to roll up on, that's an amazing gift. And I would say thank you. But it's definitely, like you had said too, it's such small, quick changes of what they could do prior to you coming in. They would have went, oh, I have a guest who is in a wheelchair. Let's make sure that I have the stuff lower, or there is a chair that she can wheel over to on the side of the counter, and just sort of a quick thought process on their end that really is, they're not, like we always say, this is a right that everyone has. They're not just doing something amazing for you. And if you switch that mindset, you come into the headspace that you're in where it's like, no, I'm going to ask for what I need.
Yeah, exactly.
And kind of even going off of that too, I know a lot of young people, especially a lot of the teenagers that come into InvisiYouth, say they feel when they first start out asking for what they would need with accessibility when they go into stores or into hotels or traveling, or even at a university when they're going in and asking for accommodations, they always don't know. They have a discomfort asking. So I wanted to know on your end, what have been some things or different tips that you would give for young people when they have to kind of step out of that comfort zone and ask for accommodations in any setting? What's worked well for you?
Yeah, I get a lot of messages from people that have been into a store or their school or, any building, and they've been like, it wasn't accessible and they didn't have any accommodations. What do I do? And I know it's way easier said than done, but just ask them. For so long, I would go into a store, realize it wasn't accessible, and just like turn around and then just complain about it on the way home. And that doesn't get anything done. If I'm in a store and I'm like, hey, I really want to go to that back rack, but I have no way to get there because you guys shoved a bunch of stuff into the aisles, then I'll go to somebody and say, hey, you guys shoved a bunch of stuff in the aisles and I can't get back there. Really would like to buy something from your lovely store, but I can't if you're not physically going to allow me to get there.
Exactly.
And it's really just bringing it to attention, because people that don't deal with that every day, that don't need accommodations, don't think about it at all. It is not in the front of their mind or even in the back of their mind, because they can step over it, they can pick it up and move it. Even other customers that are able-bodied, they could just kind of like shove it out of the way, jump over it, go around to a like little thinner area and wiggle through. But, I can't do that. And then when it comes to accommodations for schools, again, just asking and being confident when you ask, because I've noticed that, I struggle with a lot of anxiety. Like I said, way easier said than done. It took many years to build up to where I am now. But saying like, these are the accommodations that I need, and I need them now, and I need them to be done correctly so that they can actually accommodate me, rather than thinking that you're a burden. I find a lot of people that ask for accommodations feel like they're a burden. They come to me like, oh, but I feel so bad. I'm like, but you need it. If I needed a glass of water and I was like dehydrated and suffering, and I was like, oh, I don't want to be a bother. I'm like, well, I'm going to die, from dehydration if I don't ask for this glass of water. It's the same thing. If you aren't going to be able to go to class, aren't going to be able to get your schoolwork done, aren't going to be able to go into a store, then ask and make it so that you can do those things.
Yeah. And I love how you said you built up to it as well, that this wasn't, you didn't jump out of the gate with a diagnosis going, I'm going to fight for everything.
No.
Even on my end as well, I tell a lot of people with the charity is some people are more vocal physically with their voice and phone calls and feel that comfort, and other people feel comfortable in more of a virtual setting of writing emails and bullet points and going back and forth. And especially in like a school setting or an employment setting, you do have a luxury of being able to say, oh, there's things that I had questions on or accommodations in a university, and type them out. And that might be where you do feel confident and assertive to ask for things, because you're not having to be face to face. Where I also think a big tip that I've always given for myself, that I was given when I was a teenager, or when I was using a cane or having to have somebody physically help me if I had my sister or a friend with me, I always said having that secondary person if you're going out and about to stores or shopping, because I usually don't wander around myself, just because that's sometimes I forget. So when having someone there, I always will say my mom or my sister, even my dad, a lot of my friends as well, they know, they can see and read me when I'm like, oh, I can't get up all those stairs. And they'll be like, oh, I got it. Let's go ask the salesperson if there's a ramp somewhere. If there's another part of the store that has less stairs than this one, or a railing, or an elevator. And a lot of times if I have somebody with me that kind of grabs the sales assistant's sort of hand, or grabs somebody in charge and taps them and goes, we have a question, the sort of first reaction is, oh, okay, somebody else asked. And then I can sort of cushion myself and feel comfortable and confident, like you said, asking for what you need.
Yeah, that I lived with my sister for the past 2 years, and we just always went everywhere together. And she has a service dog as well. So like we already deal with those access issues as well. But it definitely helps to have somebody else that makes you more confident, because you feel, better and more yourself and bolder around your friends, I think, or at least in my case. And around my fiance, if I'm in a place and he can tell that I'm upset because it's not accessible, or because I really wanted to do something and can't, he'll call someone over and be like, excuse me, we have a problem. He is just not afraid at all to like tell people that there's an issue. And that's the same way it's gotten to be with my parents and my other friends. When we go out, they're like ready to fight.
No, which is great to have people with that sort of assertiveness. And even another thing I was going to even ask too is when you do go to stores, I know a big thing we always get from a sort of inclusivity part is they have to go shopping, and if they're using mobility aids, if they're in a wheelchair, they have prosthetics, or they have medical accessories with them that they need. They always go, well, I can never go into a store and figure out what will actually physically work with what I have to have from a medical standpoint on me. So I wanted to know, especially since you've modeled for Aerie, you go in and out of stores, you sort of work with a wheelchair and then with walking canes as well. What kind of do you look for when you're in a store going, oh, okay, these clothes might be more accessible or more adaptive for in my position?
Yeah, and I think, that just illustrates the point that we need more representation. We need more clothing brands putting more diverse models in clothes, so that people can go ahead and, look up and say, oh, okay, that looks good with canes, that looks good with crutches, that looks good with a feeding tube, instead of being like, oh, I don't know if it looks good. And, sometimes you're too nervous to try stuff on because you're afraid it's going to look bad. Yeah. And if you're in like a bad mental state that day, then it just kind of ruins your day and you give up. I've definitely been there plenty of times. But I think a lot of times with clothes, I wear a lot of t-shirts and jeans. I'm a pretty plain person. But I just did a shoot last week, and the stylist was really upset because every shirt she put me in scrunched at the bottom because I'm sitting down, because that's what shirts do when you sit down. And she's like, can you fix that? I'm like, nope, that's just part of my life. Shirts scrunch. And she was like livid at the fact that it was scrunching and not looking right. I was like, welcome to my life. So it definitely helps that I know how to sew. But a lot of times if I get a shirt and it scrunches too much when I'm sitting in my wheelchair, I just kind of like cut it off, make it like a bit of a crop top and hem it. Or if it's a fabric that doesn't need to get hemmed, like I'll have to like make my own clothes more adaptive, because a lot of companies, don't bother or think about it. But lots of t-shirts are pretty nice, because some nice, fitted like wrap shirts or something that would be, I guess, more sexy, don't look as good when you're sitting down, which is just so unfortunate.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I love that you said too is just if you physically were able to see more diverse models or see in campaigns, that would be such a selling point for people. Because even I said this to one of the speaking engagements I had done, and somebody had asked me, oh, well, I had a cane, and they were wondering, well, do you have to shorten pants or dresses or wear different things, or my shoes as well? Oh, you have to wear flats when you're with a cane. I'm like, well, no, I can wear small, thicker heels because I'm comfortable. This is just to help me balance and not fall over. So a lot of times I've even said there's sort of a twofold of tips. I said, well, you can definitely look at clothing that has mannequins that are in different positions. My favorite is going to Athletica, and they have them doing natural yoga poses, but I'm looking at clothes with the model sitting, even though she's sort of in a namaste photo pose. Yeah. But you see them sort of moving and doing work with it. And then a big thing was always see people who you follow on social media, people like yourself, because a lot of times you tag the brands of your jeans or of your shirts, and you can see, oh, okay, these are people that I love what they represent. They're doing activism work. And then I can see what they're wearing and going, oh, they get a lot of their shirts from this company, or oh, they seem to get their jeans from here. And that then sort of gives you an idea of going, if someone like yourself is wearing shirts a lot from this one brand, then, oh, okay, if I'm also in a wheelchair, then that might be a good place to look at and to start.
Yeah, and I think the funniest thing was when I did my last shoot with Aerie, they put me in a pair of shorts, and you get and it might not be the nicest little phrase, but we call it the crotch tent when you sit down in, like, baggy shorts. That's just what they do. Oh my God. So they kept trying to, like, fix it and figure it out, and we had to literally, like, shorten the hem of the shorts so that wouldn't happen. And I went, yeah, so I got lucky and you guys shortened it for me, but now every person that's going to want to buy these is going to think that they're going to fit. And it was really fun to see the stylists just kind of recognize that. Yeah. And, you know, it's a very different thing with the stylist I just worked with, who was frustrated with it, and then another stylist who is like, okay, wait, how can we start fixing this so that this doesn't happen for other people in wheelchairs? And, like, goes to her notes and starts writing stuff down. Okay, if we change the seam by, you know, this, whatever the heck.
Yeah, it's patterns.
yeah. But it's interesting to see, or to watch people realize just how much clothing changes when you're sitting down or using crutches or a cane. Or my sister has a feeding tube, and Aerie came out with a swimsuit that's, like, has cutouts. And it happened to have a cutout, like, perfectly where her feeding tube was, so she could wear a one piece, but have her feeding tube, like, not be pressed on.
Oh my God.
And it was like, you guys just made an accessible swimsuit without even realizing it. Like, that's how easy it is.
No, and I love that you said, too, because this was a big thing I sort of jokingly said when I was even in a store and wondering how things would look if I had to wear, like, compression sleeves and things that help with swelling, because those are even the sometimes not most attractive things to put on. And I remember looking at the saleswoman who was there, and I said, well, naturally able-bodied and healthy people need to sit, stand, bend as well, so wouldn't it make sense to do this when you're sizing clothes to see, oh, this shirt looks horrendous when it sits down, we might need to shorten it or do something else. I said, just because I have medical necessities doesn't mean that my sister who's healthy and able-bodied would want a shirt that looks this weird when she sits as well.
Yeah, oh my gosh, exactly.
Which I think is fantastic that you said, too, even with when you mentioned with your sister and the feeding tube, it shouldn't be such an amazing moment when you go, oh my God, you made this accessible, and you didn't even realize it. It should be something that you actually even think of as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to your sister finding an awesome bathing suit, though. Shameless plug for that. I love that.
Yeah, she got like 3 in 3 different colors. She's like, I need all of them.
I need them now. I love that. So actually, before I transition out of this segment into one of my favorites where Abby gets to tell me a fun story, I want to thank all of you guys for listening and watching the InvisiYouth chat sessions. Getting into 23 episodes, we're almost at sort of a fun 25, which we're really excited to be able to hit in this sort of video podcast series, and this being part of our virtual programming. And we always want to thank you for that love and support, subscribing, sharing the show on our YouTube channel or any of our podcast channels as well. It really is such a help for us to maintain the virtual aspect of our programming and reach more young people in all the different countries we work in, have amazing guests on like Abby. And we always say we'll have a little link here popping up from our donation page, because 100% of all donations go for us keeping our virtual programming and hosting our leadership programs like our Global Brand Leaders program and our hangouts and meetups, our fun events that we host. It's all able to provide for these amazing things. So we always thoroughly appreciate any donations. We always say, don't get a Starbucks coffee one day and donate to a charity of your choice that month, because even a small amount really helps in all that we're able to do. So we're so thankful for that. And I would say thank you for you guys also checking out this video podcast series. I always say subscribe, thumbs up to all of it, because then you get to see the amazing Abby in action. And why would we not want that? So transitioning back out of that, we're going to go into our intermission segment, which is, like I said, one of my personal favorite times of the episode. When Abby tells me a story, this is So That One Time.
So that one time.
You all know with So That One Time, you get to sit back and relax with me. I get to drink my water and hang out, not speaking, and Abby gets to tell me a story. So Abby, the stage is yours.
Thanks. I have like so many, and I have a lot of really short ones. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing, because there are never like long interactions, and I didn't want to do something like sad and depressing. I have a lot lot of very funny stories.
I'm living for this, yes.
Yeah. Just lots of like little tiny things where you're like, I'm sorry, what now? Like something like that. Where I guess if you were not somebody that was in a wheelchair, you would be appalled. But as someone who deals with this daily, it's just hilarious. By far my favorite thing that's ever happened. I think since I started wheelchair racing, I was at the beach and I was training, and it's like super flat because it's the beach. So I'm just going up and down this one street for like, I don't know, maybe like 45 minutes, forever. And there's this mom with her young son who was like waiting at a crosswalk while I was going. And I hear him go, "Mommy, I want one of those."
I love it.
She goes, no, honey. No, you really don't. And it was the funniest thing ever. Like, I had to almost stop because I was laughing so hard. But it's like, poor, like, he just wants to, you know, have some sort of cool toy. And she was like, "No, you really don't want one." Like, this, and you'd be like her, and that's not quite what you want. And so that just made me giggle really hard. And then I had someone, again, recently, they happen constantly. But when I was at the airport, it was a businessman, because I was in New York, and he was like wearing a suit, and I'm in like plain clothes. And he comes up to me and he goes, "Is that for like a temporary thing?" And I went, is what for a temporary thing? He goes, "Your wheelchair." And I went, "Like a temporary disability?" He goes,
we have some of those. Yep, we have them.
I was like, no, this is my permanent wheelchair. And it's same with my cane. He's like, "Okay, it's a really cool accessory." I'm like, "It's not an accessory. It's a mobility aid." He goes, "Well, you rock it." I'm like, "Thanks." And like he like awkwardly like shuffled away, like he wasn't quite sure what he wanted. But it was, I'd get that a lot, where people, if I'm using a cane or my arm crutches, they're like, "Ooh, that looks really good with your outfit." I'm like, "It's not an accessory," but I mean, I make it an accessory a lot of times. I like wrap it in colors. But I've had so many people just think that's like a fashion statement. I'm like, nope, just try not to die. Thanks, though.
I'm just imagining being like, today I want to sit in a wheelchair. That's what I'm choosing
right?
today.
Like, trust me, you really don't.
No, I love that. That's actually so. Oh my, love New Yorkers. Sometimes they're very blunt in their questions.
Yeah, they're great. And when I was wheeling from my hotel to where I was working in Brooklyn, so I'm like, first of all, Brooklyn's way more accessible than New York City, in my opinion, in the small area that I've been in. It's much flatter and at least cleaner. Mm-hmm. Like, I would never shake somebody's hand after rolling around in NYC, because it's just disgusting.
You'd be like, "I need Purell,
like, "Hi," I'm like, "You don't want to touch this. You really don't." I would not. And so I'm like waiting at a crosswalk, and this car turns left and then reverses and like pulls up to the curb. And I'm like, "Dear God, I'm about to be kidnapped."
Oh, no.
And he pulls down the window. And he goes, "Hey," and I'm like, "Hi, I'm here too," and like leans back and points to his wheelchair in the passenger seat. And I was like, "Oh," and like wave of relief. He can't do anything to me.
Yeah. We'd be rolling away from each other.
Yeah, and he goes, "I'm so sorry. The city sucks at accessibility." And I'm like, "It really does." And he's like, "Are you here living or just work?" I'm like, "I'm just here for the day." He's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry though. Like, I wish I could do something about it." And then he drove off, and it was just the funniest interaction ever. Like, two people just bonding over the inaccessibility in a city. I was like, "Thank you, stranger."
No stranger danger. It was stranger appreciation as a moment. I love that.
Yeah, and like there was a girl standing next to me also waiting to cross, and like I could tell she was getting really hesitant. And then we were like talking like we were friends, and she was like, "Okay, what is happening right now?" I'm like, "You don't understand."
You're like, yeah, I have no idea who that is.
Yeah.
We bond with I do. Anytime I see someone who looks relatively under the age of 40 with a cane, or we have the same compression sleeves on, you always have that like eye contact, being like, I feel
nod,
it.
yeah.
Yep. You're like, I feel you. I feel that moment for sure.
100%.
So I love that. Oh my God. So even speaking of that being sort of a powerful moment for you, the power moments of Abby's life, we're gonna switch out of story time and we're gonna go into our next segment, which I'm really excited to talk about because it goes into my love of sports and Abby's amazing new athletic experiences that she's been having. We're going to go into Path to Power.
Path to Power.
With Path to Power, this is where we get to talk about all the how-tos and the step-by-steps of owning your health and owning that chronic illness disability journey, and finding in certain niches ways that we can find more empowerment and expand our power as young people with, as I always say, the medically adultish people that we are. So, like I had mentioned, and Abby's talked about it too a few times, Abby does wheelchair racing, which is amazing. And we're gonna definitely, you guys are gonna have photos of seeing Abby, especially on her Instagram. She like rocks the modeling poses with the wheelchair racing. I'm like super excited about that. So I really kind of want to know as well, how did you sort of think about wanting to do wheelchair racing, or what was sort of that drive of wanting to go into an adaptive sporting style?
Yeah, so before I got diagnosed, I don't want to say before I was sick because I have genetic disorders and things I've had for like years. But I guess before it got like bad.
Yeah.
So before I got diagnosed, I did so many sports. I mean, as a kid, I was doing every other sport, like every other summer. My parents never made me stick with one sport, which I actually like kind of appreciated because I did everything from like soccer to basketball to gymnastics to swimming. I mean, I did everything. I was a very active kid. And then in high school, I guess maybe like sophomore to mid senior year, I did CrossFit. And I was like an elite level athlete, like number 2 in my age group in the state. Okay, it's really funny.
I'm going to take you if I need somebody to lift something. I'm going to be like, Abby.
Yeah, right. And the girl who was number 1, we became very good friends. Like we did the state competition together, and I was second and she was first. Great friends. She just got diagnosed with EDS like a month ago.
Oh my God. That's so ironic.
Right? Like, what are the odds? So that was kind of like a crazy story of that. So like neither of us can lift anymore. But
I hear you.
Yeah. And that was my favorite thing. I loved being athletic. I woke up early and worked out constantly. It was my form of therapy because I could afford therapy. But I could afford a gym. And it was a blast. And so when I got diagnosed, that was probably at my lowest point that I've ever been. Like, couldn't roll over in bed without help. I mean, it was just bad.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for my mental state and just really hard in general because I liked being outside. I liked moving, but it just hurt. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then I want to say last year I started like trying to go on really short walks, like just around the parking lot of my apartment complex, which was a small apartment complex, like less than a quarter mile. I mean, just small things. And then when I moved into my house, when I lived in Athens, I just moved out of that. I would start walking around. Our neighborhood was a loop. So I would do like small loops and then the biggest loop and then the bigger loop. And it felt really nice, but it was also hurting my joints. I mean, I really had to brace up for like a 4-minute walk, ankle braces, knee braces, cane, arm crutches. I mean, I just looked like
going to battle you're going to battle / an ice hockey player.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had so many people to be like, oh my gosh, what happened? I'm like, it's a long story. Just let me go on my walk. And so I started looking into adaptive sports, and I have a good friend who is on the USA women's Paralympic wheelchair basketball team.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's super cool. And she's been trying to get me to do wheelchair basketball with her forever. Don't like basketball. It is just not my favorite sport. Same. I don't like watching it. I don't like playing it. Like, I have nothing against it. Like, I don't like hate on anybody that that likes basketball or anything. I just I can't get into it. It's not interesting for me.
I know.
And I was just like, I don't know. And then So I was looking into adaptive sports programs like in Georgia and just not finding any that were for adults. All of them are for kids or veterans, and then you have the Shepherd Center, which is like mostly spinal cord injuries.
Yeah.
And just like didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And so I reached out to one program that was for kids and was like, hey, here's my situation. Like, what can you like say, do you guys have any advice, I guess?
Yeah. And
we chatted for a bit, and while we were chatting, I started doing 5Ks in my everyday wheelchair with a freewheel attachment. And a freewheel is like you hook it onto the foot plate of your wheelchair and it lifts your casters off the ground so that they don't hit things and, like send you flying. So it makes your wheelchair almost a tricycle, which is really nice. And so I started doing 5Ks in those, and I think I did 3 or 4 5Ks in my everyday chair. And then Blaze kind of pulled some strings. I'm 21, and like I was a good 5 or 6 years older than their second oldest person. I'm like, I could be your babysitter. And so they pulled some strings and let me rent a racing wheelchair from them and attend their track practices. And that really like pushed me forward because I started learning like how to work out for a racing wheelchair and like what was going to be best for me, because I like doing distance rather than sprints, even though we found out that my body is like made for sprints. I have really short arms. And if you have short arms, you're supposed to be a sprinter, not a long distancer, but I prefer long distances. So we're like, okay, not my best choice, but here we are. And then I just started signing up for more 5Ks and doing more and more races. And I got to know the people at Shepherd Center, and now they're like, come train with us. And, I have friends with them now, which is nice. But I was just entering any 5K I could find, really. And I'd look at the route and be like, oh, it's hilly. All right, let's go. I mean, it wasn't, okay, is this going to be wheelchair accessible? It was more like, are they going to let me do it? And then I would just kind of do it.
And I love that you said, too, that a lot of this, yet again, is you sort of taking that initiative of going, I want to try adaptive sports, I want to try wheelchair racing, and reaching out to what you could find, even if you didn't let the age limitation or the injury limitation of what they were specific on be sort of, oh, okay, I shouldn't even call. Because a lot of times, like you had said, they might adapt something for you, or even Blaze could have then found a company you didn't know, and they might have been working with adults. And so I think from even everything you were saying, that was probably one of the biggest tips I could even think of. What I have it written on this note card, so you just beat me, would have been sort of being proactive and asking, when you do that Google research, of asking the companies you can find, how could I sort of take a step into this, or where can you lead me?
Yeah, I definitely just wanted to take charge of it for myself, because, and I knew this, and then I like got my hopes up for a second and then didn't, but none of my disabilities are qualifying Paralympic wise. And so I knew I was going into an adaptive sport that I couldn't do anything big with. A lot of people that do adaptive sports, they, want to go Olympic. They want to do something big. They want to win nationals or state. And I can't do any of those things because none of my disabilities qualify me. Which, and I talked to my coaches about this, is definitely because of a lack of research. Because when I went to get qualified, they had no idea what half the stuff I had was.
Oh, man.
And so they were just like, well, can you explain it? Well, I don't think it's qualifying, because they just didn't know what it was. And I mean, it's not that they don't think I'm disabled. They just don't have enough research and enough knowledge on, I think, what everything is and how it affects people to realize that it's definitely disabling and definitely should be qualifying.
Yeah.
Like, I fit all the standards of a T54, which is like limited to no movement below the belly button. I fit all those standards, but because those standards come from disabilities that they don't know about, it's not qualifying. So when I wanted to start racing, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do for me, not necessarily for like winning.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to do whatever it took to do it, because I knew I needed to be active, and I knew that that was something that was going to help me both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And so, I went into it and like, hey, if you can't help me, that's totally fine. But what do you got?
Yeah, and I love a big thing too is that like you said, I wanted to be active. That was a physical and mental motivator for you. So even kind of going off of that, what would be, you did take that big first step. I know you and I have a similar background, that you loved sports, you were athletic. I was a competitive tennis player. That's where my injury from what was genetically chronic illnesses for me sort of spurred on my sort of 10-year journey now. And it was, I always say it even now, I wish that somebody had mentioned there was wheelchair tennis or there were adaptive sports I could have tried, because I didn't even have a physical therapist mention it with my having an athletic background, that could have been something beneficial for me. It's something I wish sort of now in hindsight, somebody that I was working with medically would have offered as an option, because I just sort of, like you said, you become, it's bittersweet not being able to do CrossFit, or I wasn't able to play tennis anymore since it was such a big identifier as part of my background. So I love how you said I wanted to bring an activity or an athleticism back into what I'm capable of. But kind of going off that, I wanted to ask, what would be sort of your tips of empowerment, if you will, for people that they might not be athletic or prior to an injury or an illness sort of taking a lot more physical control? What would be sort of your tips for people who might be a little nervous but want to try sort of an adaptive sporting opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, number one would be go for it, but also, like, don't overdo it with your body. There are so many other sports that I wanted to try and do adaptive and otherwise. I just, wanted to shimmy in somewhere that I knew would just hurt my body. Like, I have the ability to run, but not for long and not without severely damaging myself.
Yeah.
And, there are people that have MS and can run and know the consequences of doing that, but do it anyway because it's something they love. And I think that's kind of what comes with it, is understand that there are consequences and benefits. Like, it's not all going to be benefits. Yeah. It's not all going to be, rainbows and sunshine. And so if you want to get into an adaptive sport, I think my biggest tip would also get into something that isn't sporting. Like, I have two hobbies that I love a lot. I have wheelchair racing for when I'm feeling great, knowing that I can go train and not hurt myself, like something that keeps me active. And then I have sewing and crafting and quilting for when I can't get out of bed, for when I just want to chill out. And I know that, like, I have such high pain that I won't be able to make myself breakfast. But I know that I need to do something to keep myself active, because, like, mentally, not necessarily physically. Yeah. Because if I'm just sitting in bed, like, wallowing in self-pity and in pain, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, I cannot do that. It is just so damaging. Yeah. And so I have two hobbies. And I think that would be my biggest tip, is find two things. Find something for your good days, whether it's a sport like walking, hiking, swimming, an adaptive sport, and then find something that you can do on high pain days.
Yeah, like, and I love that you even said too, like if you're gonna push yourself physically, like, definitely, like we'll always say, definitely mention it to a doctor, take a phone call, write an email to them going, I really want to give this a try. What would be sort of the starting things or my definite parameters of you can't exert X, Y, and Z, or if you have treatment days or you have physio plans that you need to medically stay part of, or things of that nature. Definitely looking into those of what your medical community, your doctors would say of these are your, like you say, you know your body so well. And we always say you are your own best advocate of talk to a doctor, see if there are major yes or no's, even on both our ends. I have issues with my cardiac. So there's things where if I'm feeling a certain thing while I'm even in a gym trying to work out, or if I have to check my heart rate. So I have to wear that monitor to check. So if I see that number, I'm like, okay, I have to, even if I'm mentally like, you can do it. And that athlete background comes into it, just push through the pain.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
You have to then be like, okay, this is my number, that if I start going over it, I need to back off. And having, like you said, those, I love that you said you have two amazing passions. One's athletic and one's more artistic, and being able to bounce between those based on your day or your health that day, I think is probably some of the best advice that would take people who might be nervous and go, okay, let me put one foot into it.
Yeah. And I also think that a lot of people think that they have to, like, go big when it comes to being athletic. Like,
you just took my last question, Abby. I'm loving this. Keep going. No, I'm loving it. Keep going. It's amazing.
That's just who I am as a person. Like, I just kind of went big. That's just who I am. But I mean, your activities and your athleticism could just be, you know, walking up the stairs like 2 times that day. And like that could be enough for you. It could be finding new physical therapy things that you can do at home. I can't go to a physical therapist because my insurance doesn't cover it.
Yeah.
And so when I want to work out, but it's like raining and I can't go to the track when it's pouring rain because then you're like sitting in a puddle in a wheelchair. So
I didn't even think of that. Yep, that sucks.
it's not great. You know, finding things that you can do at home
Yeah.
that are small but big.
Yeah.
And
And I love that you said that too, because it was a big thing that, like I said, that was my last question was this one, but really going, there's such a thing as, I always say, I even wrote it down, functional disability is not something that's in the media. People always, if they see someone with a chronic illness or disability trying to be athletic, it is that mindset of I need to go to Paralympic level and state level. So that becomes sometimes very nerve-wracking if you're like, I have never done a sport and now I have a prosthetic or mobility aids, or I have a port or a pick, and now you start getting nervous of, oh, they're not going to know what to do, they don't have a medical background, and you start to become nervous because you think, I can't reach that Paralympic level. But that's because a lot of people don't see the functional chronic illness or the functioning disability of, I can just have fun being sporty and give it a try, and I can literally fall down, because I do all the time, and get back up and go. My sister, who is able-bodied, could also fall down, and we would both laugh. She's more coordinated than me, so that never happens. Even on a good day, I'm way less coordinated. But I love that you said that too. You don't have to, it's not just because I have a chronic illness or disability, I have to be amazing Paralympic level. I can just have fun being sporty like I would if I was healthy or able-bodied.
And I think, I mean, for me, and then I'm sure many other people that have chronic illnesses, it is very much I'm not competing against anybody else except literally my own body.
Yeah.
I mean, I am competing against my body. Like, essentially, like I have to condition myself so that I don't attack in the middle of the road. I have to do certain exercises to make sure I don't dislocate my shoulders or like my hips. Yeah. That's become something like I never used to dislocate anything like hip wise. Mm-hmm. It was mostly like my knees and my ankles. But then when I started wheelchair racing, the position that I'm in the chair and like the way my body is sitting against my hips, I dislocate my hips a lot. And so it's a lot of, okay, if I dislocate a hip in the middle of a race, I need to just kind of like push through it until I can pop it back in or decide to pull over and know that that competition between the sport that I'm doing and my body is, I mean, bigger and more important than a competition between me and the wheelchair racer next to me, because it's just so different. And even when it comes to like pick lines and ports, there's just so much that has to be taken into account. And I really wanted to mention Alyssa Seeley. She's on the para triathlon team for Team USA. Awesome. And she's an amputee, but she also has EDS and POTS.
Oh,
and
amazing.
She just won an ESPYs award for like the ESPN, and she has a port and has to wear braces for her EDS and then her prosthetic as well. But so when they do training for swimming for the triathlon area, she has to make sure that her port is safe.
Yeah.
You know, she has to do infusions way before so that it is closed up and safe when she gets in lake water.
Yeah.
And nobody really realizes that's something she has to worry about. And it's just really interesting to see how, you know, different everybody has to work, how you're competing against your body.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too. There's so many times, this is actually, you could like co-host the show with me. That's a perfect transition into what I was going to ask you in the next segment because of mobility aids and things that make working out accessible. So we'll just smoothly transition into that one that Abby just did so perfectly for me. So we're going to go into our next segment talking a little bit more about those different tips of a guidebook that we can build with Medically Adultish Guidebook.
Medically Adultish Guidebook.
With the Medically Adultish Guidebook, obviously that is our fun slogan that we have coined here at InvisiYouth. We live in this in-between between childhood, pediatrics, and adult healthcare, and we call them at InvisiYouth our medically adultish, or our teeniatrics as our trademark of being that in-between. See, I gotta laugh. Everybody loves that one. So with us, we want to really find out what is sort of the different things that you would add in your guidebook to life, of the different aspects of things that that we could be sort of kick-ass in phrases, different tools, apps, accessories that we would have Abby and I talking about that we would always say, as I like to point out to our Fun Fancy notebook, take notes, put your note-taking app on if you're not old school like me with a pen, and you can take some notes here because we're going to go through sort of the guidebook of tips and tricks to life of being medically adultish. So like I said, we're going to tap into Abby's sort of Aerie modeling / wheelchair racing backgrounds and sort of give sort of our guidebook here for this sort of fun skill set that Abby kind of fits into 2 frames, which I'm stoked on. So like we talked about in the other segment, what would be sort of some of the must-have mobility aids or medical accessories that you use when you're being physically active, like when you're racing or if you know you're going to be moving around quite a bit?
Yeah, so I mean, it really is an arsenal that I have to take, like pre and post race. There's so much more care that goes into it for just a normal racer, or even just like a normal wheelchair racer in quotes. And it's so like I have to wake up much earlier than I guess anybody else who's preparing for a race, because I have to hydrate myself. I take like little Propel packs that are packed with electrolytes.
Oh, cool.
Because of POTS, I don't hydrate well. I have to up my salt intake or my electrolyte intake so that I actually keep the water that I'm putting in my system and doesn't just go through me.
Yep.
And so I drink like 32 ounces of an electrolyte drink and then have something like salty for breakfast, like some pretzels and then a banana, maybe a piece of toast with some like salty peanut butter, and try and drink all that drink and eat all that about an hour before I leave.
Yeah. And
then I have to go to the bathroom before I leave because at races, only porta potties are available, and those are not wheelchair accessible.
I was just going to say, those aren't good for us.
No. And so if I need to like go to the bathroom in a race, I'm stuck. I've only been to one race that had a wheelchair accessible bathroom that fit my entire racing chair.
Oh,
one out of the 13 that I've done.
Oh my God.
And so there's planning that has to go in. That's even just kind of like silly things.
Yeah.
And then I have to like have my medical ID on me because I race alone most of the time. Mm-hmm. If I'm like with a group, I usually end up, somewhere else. And so I have my medical ID that has my emergency contacts on it, like my blood type, the illnesses that I have, and have to wear that on my wrist. Mm-hmm. And then I also have a smartwatch. I have a Garmin smartwatch. Ooh. Because they're cheaper than like Samsung or Apple watches. Yeah. And I can actually tell it to alert me when my heart rate gets to a certain like point.
Amazing.
And, yeah, right? It's so nice because if I'm racing and my heart rate gets, above this, this is like so high for somebody that doesn't have POTS. But like, if it gets like above 190, then I need to start taking a break. But like I went on like a short hike the other week and I was like, oh wow, we're only at 170. And my fiance was like, you're what now? I'm like, no, I'm fine.
Story of my life.
And so, I need that to be on to let me know, hey, are you in a safe heart rate zone? Do you need to go like take a break and like recalibrate and make sure you're not going to kill yourself? And it's a lot of like doing specific stretches to really warm up my joints mm-hmm. and make sure that they're not going to dislocate with too much force. I found that I haven't dislocated like my shoulders and my elbows at all wheelchair racing. I think because the motion is so fluid, which is really nice. It's not like an awkward motion for your body to do, or at least for my body to do. But I need to warm it up differently. Like a lot of races have warm up activities that they do before they get to the start line, and it's like, jumping up, and I can't really do that. So I have, created a regimen for me to warm up my joints specifically. And then, have my meds, like if any enzymes that I need to take, if I know I'm going to eat afterwards, have any, pre-meds that I need to take that I would normally take if I woke up at like, 9:30, but races usually start anywhere from like, I've had races start as early as 5 a.m. as late as 10.
Oh,
so yeah, I know.
I'm bugging my eyes out if you're watching this podcast. Like, no boy.
And so there's a lot of planning that I think goes with that. And I have a fanny pack that I keep with me because it can sit in like right behind me in my wheelchair. And that has all my stuff in it, and it has like a little medical patch so that if I'm unconscious or something happens and I pass out, someone can see, okay, there's probably medical stuff in there. It's got information and whatnot, and like my ID that people know who I am.
Yeah, no, and I love that you said that too. A lot of it is sort of, I would imagine, sort of things that you've figured out in terms of your sort of warming up regimen is things that in your first race you probably didn't know that that's what you needed to do, but then after it and then going into your second race, you went, oh, I should probably warm up X, Y, and Z or have these things on me, because then I realized as an afterthought that you would need them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, it conflicts with my desire to be zero waste, because electrolyte drinks like the Propel packets, or like a vitamin water, you know, those come in plastic. So like it hurts a little, but I tell people a lot when they're like, what, you use plastic, like you're a hypocrite. Like, no, I'm chronically ill. It's chronically ill is not eco-friendly. I mean, it's just kind of how it is. And I do it where I can, and then where I can't, I just kind of let it go and know that I'm making as much a difference as I possibly can, but also I would like to stay alive.
You can only make a difference if you're still alive, exactly.
Yeah, right?
You can't do anything else if you're on the other side. So I know, and I love that you said that too, is that when it's medically functional for you, you get to be as close to zero waste as you want, but there are things that, even with pill bottles having to be certain colors of plastic, just sort of I'm going to say photosynthesis, and that's not the right word, but because it can't, with the UV lights, they can't change sort of the chemical balancing of different parts of the drug and medication that you need to realistically maintain. And so that is, like you said, there's a lot that you have to kind of balance of what you bring medication-wise or your medically adaptive equipment. I know for myself, I plug K-tape like it's nobody's business, because that thing keeps that thing keeps my snapping IT bands in perfectly. It's something that's easy with sensory issues, with me having neurovascular damage and that part of my condition. It's not too bad when I have to take it off of my skin. It doesn't irritate from a nervous system standpoint. I'm always joking that I always have a set of earplugs on me that are sort of my neutral skin tone, because sometimes volume in a gym, or even when I'm out and about, or if I'm out at night, volume is too much with me having neuropathic issues, so I wear earplugs. So there's fun things like on that side that you had said, there's a lot of trial and error, which I think is a great tip to give people of, sort of think of scenarios you're in, but then try it out and then go and figure it out the next time of what you would then need.
Yeah. I feel the KT tape thing. I have tan lines of tape in so many weird places. I mean, it's hilarious.
I love that. What about, we said this before in the beginning of the show, that we love your stigma breaking t-shirts, but what would be some either other brands like an Aerie that you love, that you would love to sort of say, these are some really great stigma breaking clothes or adaptive clothes or jewelry that you really like to have?
Unfortunately, there are not a lot. I did count how many awareness t-shirts that I had yesterday after we talked. So I was like, how many do I have? And I have 6 that are directly related to access or disability of some kind.
I love it.
And then subtle ones, I would call this subtle. It's got blue zebras on it, and a bit EDS and POTS at the same time, but nobody would really know. So things including something like this, I have 11.
I love that. But
That's just so many shirts.
Well, like you said too, I will shamelessly plug, we are a nonprofit, but so many nonprofits, including ours, have amazing sort of slogan t-shirts that you are obviously financially assisting a charity, but also you're being able to bring a little bit of awareness in that. I know towards more of the fall of 2019, we'll be having some fun new slogan shirts on our end, so we'll make sure that Abby has a new one to add to her collection. But I always say, even on my end, I work especially with mental health nonprofits. They have amazing slogan t-shirts that I love wearing because it gets that conversation starting. I know the other...
I love conversation shirts.
They are the best. And obviously, even like you said, a zebra t-shirt is going to be do you like zebras or do you want to be a zoologist? And you're like, well, actually, no. But here it is. And I think that's, like you said, that's fun because it gets the conversation starting. I know the one I was going, if we were going to shout out any other brand besides Aerie, I know all of my UK community love ASOS because they do I wrote her down too, and I'm going to totally not pronounce pronounce her name correctly, but Mama Cax, she is an amputee and wears a lot of their athleisure line and modeling. And I knew right when they did a lot of their work, ASOS kept popping up for our UK community as a brand that shows really fun types of accessible clothing, where they have models that are diverse, or they have their models in different poses or in videos that you can see the clothes and movements. So I know obviously you're doing work with Aerie as well. That's something they take very seriously, of the no filtering and really showing how it works and fits on you.
Yeah, and then, I mean, you have Tommy Hilfiger, that they came out with their adaptive apparel line, which is just crazy. I can't afford any of it because it's Tommy Hilfiger, but it's super cool. And, like, those are brands that I'd love to, you know, work in the future, like, work with them in some way.
Put it in the universe.
Yeah, right? There's one company called Slick Chicks. That's their Instagram handle. You can look them up. And they make adaptive underwear. So it like side fastens for people that are paralyzed or have some like limited mobility, because, you know, like wiggling into underwear in a wheelchair or like not being able to move, just not fun.
Yeah.
And so that's what they make. And I think that's really nice because it's like affordable but still cute, and just the adaptive things that nobody thinks about. So it's like, cool, I have adaptive clothes, but like, what about my other stuff?
Yeah, no, I love that. And kind of even, I'm going to go into sort of like your other sort of style of work that you do a lot of talking about accessibility. Are there different either apps that you use or things that you like, even if it's just sort of Google Satellite, I know is the big tip we always give people before they go out. Is there sort of different apps or tips that you like to sort of find if the locations or hotels you're staying at are accessible?
Yeah, unfortunately, I found that hotel websites, when they say, or at least in New York, when they say we're accessible, they're not actually always accessible. Mm-hmm. Like, their idea of accessible is very different from a wheelchair user's idea of accessible. So it's hard to trust those sometimes, but I think it's a website, and I'm pretty sure it's an app, but I could be wrong. It's called Map-O-Meter, and you can map out your route, whether it be like a full bike route or whatever, or just like from your house to the grocery store, and it'll tell you the elevation. Which has been so helpful as someone who's like in a wheelchair, and hills are just so different than when you're walking.
Yeah.
It's nice to be like, oh, okay, that's a lot of elevation gain. Maybe I should take a car.
Yeah.
And so that's been like probably the thing I use the most as far as apps or anything, because it's nice to see just how hilly something is, or see just how flat something is. Be like, okay, so this is, you know, road accessible, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And I love that you said too, it's sort of that website is able to kind of predetermine whether something's accessible. I know the one tip we always give is sort of lean into the social media side, because most businesses or hotels, if you click what their photos are tagged in, you're going to see either videos or photos that general users and hotel patrons and people who shop at stores, you'll get to see. And then from people who are not professional photographers trying to make everything look aesthetically pleasing, you'll get to see, oh, that store has so many stairs, there looks like there's no elevators. And then you would know what to call and ask about, because you would have sort of a real reality version of what some things look like. So we always say lean into the social media when you want some ideas of what things actually look like. But I love that website too. I'm going to mentally keep that right there. I'm going to definitely use that in the future.
Yeah, it's great. Also great for like races, because a lot of times they'll like send you the course.
Yeah.
But it's often after I've signed up. So I'm like, oh, cool, it's all hills. Great.
I'm like, I should have used that a month ago.
Yeah, right?
And I wanted to kind of, sort of on a last note too, a big thing of a lot of, obviously when you sort of were able to get brought into the Aerie campaign, they use their hashtags of that sort of nature. But what would be some, if people were looking to either get into more adaptive sports or wanting to find adaptive clothing or being able to do more disability awareness, what sort of are your must-have hashtags to use on your posts that have been great for you to bring more people to your page, but also hashtags you've looked at that have given you more insight to other individuals and charities and companies?
That's a good question. I definitely think like hashtag your own chronic illnesses, 100%. Like, you know, like hashtag EDS, hashtag RSD, you know, look those things up, because that has easily been the best way for me to find other people and for people to find me. And then I think the hashtag that really brought a lot of people, I guess, to my page and gave me a big platform to educate was the hashtag ambulatory wheelchair users exist.
Huh.
I'm pretty sure Annie Elaney came up with that one, but I could be really
Love
wrong, and I
her.
feel bad if I've credited somebody poorly. But that one was probably the biggest one, because I posted a photo of me in my wheelchair and then me standing up, because I can do both.
Love a good side-by-side.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people who were like, whoa, I never considered that people in wheelchairs could stand, which, like, really? But also, it just shows, how uneducated a lot of people are. And then when I worked with Aerie shortly after that, they allowed me to put it in practice. They had photos of me in my wheelchair, and then also allowed me to take photos with them with my cane and without a mobility aid. Like, that's not my life. I'm not bound to my wheelchair. Like, I like to sit in a bed and be comfy, not sit next to it and be like, cool. Like, I would walk on some rocks with my cane, because definitely wheelchair couldn't do that. And so it was really nice. I think that really educated a lot of people.
Yeah.
And made them look at the hashtag and see, hundreds and thousands of other ambulatory wheelchair users. We're like, we can walk, but we also use a wheelchair. Yeah. And that's not a miracle, it's just life.
It always is fun, though, when you do stand up in public out of a wheelchair, put your cane down and walk, and people think they just witnessed the miracle.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. But
right.
I love that you said, too, a lot of it is sort of really simple hashtags. We'll always even say things that we post at InvisiYouth. It is sort of just posting rare disease, chronic illness, invisible illness, and putting wheelchair user, and those are just sort of the people think that sometimes the hashtags that they use or they click on have to be the most catchphrasey types, even though we try very hard to be funny and punny. Doesn't always work, but like you said, a lot of it is people then can find you because it's similar illnesses or they have different illnesses, but they also use walking crutches or a cane or a wheelchair, and it gives you sort of a whole other access to people from, like, we with InvisiYouth, we work across physical and mental health spectrum, so it's everything under the sun. So us putting mental health and disability as two separate hashtags, we have two people in two different parts of the world that can then connect on the same thing just by us putting both of their hashtags together. And I think, like you had mentioned too, from having Aerie really showing all the forms of you wearing their clothes was probably such an amazing response on your end, with them having then seeing your hashtags of going, oh wow, that's amazing that you're looking at all the different forms of what you wear their clothes like. Yeah,
it was really cool.
No, I love that. And that kind of sort of ends that note of the sort of guidebook of Abby. So we're going to make sure we're going to be linking a lot of these things below in this show, so you guys can check out everything that Abby was talking about. And like I said, we keep talking about how amazing Abby's Instagram is and her social media work that she does. Like I said, anyone who does honesty with a little bit of sarcasm is A-okay as an activist in the InvisiYouth world. So I want to thank you so much, Abby. Like I said, we have so many people that really wanted to have not only an Aerie model, but having you on the show was such a gift to so many of our team here, really wanting to make sure that we got to bring you on and highlight some of your amazing life advice and motivation. So I know this is an amazing episode, so I wanted to first thank you so much for being our guest today.
Well, thank you. I know we've been trying to get this to actually happen forever, and so I'm so glad we got to do it. It's so much fun.
I'm so glad. This is going to be a partnership that happens again. We're putting that one as well. We're going to get to work with Abby more. But I want to make sure people get to find you on social media and the work that you do. So let everyone know where your handles are, where they can find you, so we can definitely plug you on the bottom so people can get to connect.
Yeah, I mean, my Instagram's pretty straightforward. It's just Abby, ABBY, _Sams, SAMS. And then I have a Twitter. I don't use it much. It's the same thing, but with 2 underscores, because 1 underscore was already taken. And those are really the only forms of social media that I use.
That's amazing. Like I said, we're going to link everything below, so you can definitely follow Abby on her journey of life, and you can definitely be a part of her amazing awareness that she's bringing to the chronic illness and disability community. So we want to make sure you all connect with her. And then, as always, you can find InvisiYouth on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at InvisiYouth, and you can find the InvisiYouth chat sessions on our YouTube channel, which is InvisiYouth. To make sure you subscribe, thumbs up to this video, obviously, so you can watch the episode. Or if you want to have the audio podcast, you can find InvisiYouth chat sessions on pretty much every podcast platform there is. It's iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Deezer, the whole gamut. So we'll have everything linked below as well in the description that you can definitely check out Abby, and you can continue to subscribe and follow us and this video podcast. So I want to thank everybody for listening and watching. Thank Abby again, and we will see you next time. Bye!